Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are giving everyone a few minutes to be logging in and from wherever they're coming from. While we're waiting for that, I just wanted to introduce ourselves and jump in the next few minutes in terms of what the topic of preparing your graduates to become engaged young alumni. I know this might feel early being January time, but ultimately we all know how busy the spring is, and it's really important to really work with your current students on campus to have a smooth transition so that when they are young alumni interacting with you, they have set expectations, you have contact information for them. So we'll dive in a minute, but before we do, I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Katie Gibson, the CEO of Wavelength. My background is really in strategic planning and constituent engagement work, and I'm joined today by Katie Devine, one of our sales managers, who's got a background in education herself and sales. So we're excited to be talking to you today about our experiences, some strategic ideas, and also bringing in actual case studies of what various schools have done. For context, we work at Wavelength with schools from K-8 to K-12, independent, private, public, as well as colleges. So we're gonna really be focusing on the K-12, K-8 space today, and we'll try and provide any anecdotes. If you have questions throughout this call that's relevant specifically to your institution, we're more than happy to take this offline and help answer questions at a later date, or you can always pop it in the chat and we'll get to it along the call, and we'll have Q&A as well. For background about Wavelength, where we work, we're an online engagement platform for alumni. So we're really focused on encouraging alumni engagement while easing your experience as admin in terms of getting you better data, making it faster and easier to personalize your outreach to your alumni base. From a K-8 perspective, it's really important to think through data and privacy of minors, which we have a few solutions for at Wavelength, but also this is important to consider when you're thinking those young alumni stages. And so we'll dive into really how we can help you think through where your young alumni are and how you as an institution and as an individual can engage with them along the various stages. So today, we're really going to be covering what those stages are, what our definitions of them are, as well as helping to identify those initiatives that can happen in each one of those stages, sharing successful anecdotes from a variety of schools, and then hopefully by the end of this call, you'll actually have some ideas of what can you be doing at your school. Ultimately, what we want you to think about is discovering ways to support the transition and stay in touch with your young alumni, knowing that the relationship is going to shift as their life stages are continuing to advance. The call itself, we're thinking it'll be about 30 to 45 minutes. We want to give you back some time to your schedule. We're happy to take the full hour if people want to have those questions, but our hope is that this is a quick hit on getting you ideas to get off the ground. So without further ado, we're going to have Katie start us off talking about those transitions.
Thank you, Katie. Yes, and we have two Katies on board today. But what we really wanted to do here is identify clear groups of your students and alumni and give you real world solutions to the problems for each stage of the alumni process. So where we're going to start is pre-graduation, which are your students that are still in your classroom. You still have access. You're seeing them every single day. We're going to move to graduation time, and then post-graduation, really the true alumni status. So right now in your schools, there are things you can be doing to promote better alumni communication and engagement with the students that are still within your walls. We want to think about both what this experience is like as a student, which can sometimes become lost when we're so worried about initiatives and focus and fundraising. What does that alumni relationship look like for your student. What are the issues going on in their lives as they're still in their classes? Well, they're still waiting to hear from colleges. And they're also looking forward to many of those lasts from high school, their prom, their graduation, senior trips, etc. So that's really what's on the mind of those students at this point. And so what you can be doing through January and June is planning your first alumni reunion for that class and any previous class. You also are in a great position to start your fundraising campaigns for those newer alumni or those future alumni. And what's really going to be key is choosing how you're going to collect your students' personal email and information. When they're still with you, it presents you a great opportunity to do that. Because I've seen a lot of barriers, and Katie, we've seen a lot of barriers of schools who don't have accurate lists of personal email. So they have to either rely on the school email or the parents' email. And obviously finishing out your fiscal year and fundraising and fiscal goals there. So what's going to happen to your students in this really kind of probably what's the biggest time in their lives up until this point? And what you can do is that during the graduation time, there's going to be tons of events, galas to support your new graduate. They'll be saying goodbyes to their friends and their teachers. They'll be following through on their family commitments, parties, seeing their family. And it's a lot of emotion, what we hear from these students. I obviously spent years as a classroom teacher, and it's pretty much the last thing on their mind is coming back to the high school they're about to graduate from. So that's why you really need to capitalize on this time before they graduate, before that week of graduation, so you get the most accurate data and information. So you are moving from the pre-graduation time. You're planning for your reunions, your fundraising, you're setting it up. And now it is time for all hands on deck for graduation. A lot of the behind the scenes work kind of halts at this time, and it's really creating those, you might be really busy creating those reunions or opportunities for your old alumni to come back and meet with your current students. It's a very, very, very busy time where, again, I want to emphasize you want to get this data collection done and the connections already in place before this graduation week. So you'll be ensuring your final tasks are completing, supporting in the final ceremonies. It's really not a great time for you to be scrambling to get your future alumni data. So we finally want to start thinking about what, the true alumni. What does your relationship look like with your graduates once they become alumni? So your graduates, again, are going to be the last thing on their mind during their summer after graduating is their former high school. They're enjoying their summer break. They're engaging in their new college community. Maybe they're returning home on breaks. But it is still a very emotional time for them that is very new. So again, we really want to focus and encourage you to put yourself in the shoes of what it feels like to be an 18-year-old graduate from high school. What do you need? What would you need? What did you need that you didn't have?
I also want to make it very clear that when we say post-graduation, as you can see with the timeline, we've listed this out as a 12 months process because as you think about your graduates, this is the first time that they're experiencing throughout those 12 months this new status of being alum of your school. The summer right afterwards, the fall when they're experiencing their new high school, their new college, the first holiday breaks, all of those are firsts for them. So the post-graduation, and we'll really dive into all of this throughout the rest of our call, but the post-graduation is actually a longer timeline than you actually think, because all of these experiences, communications you're providing to them, they're going to be firsts throughout the full year. So just think about that when you are trying to consider your definitions and your timeline, that even though you've got a well-established communication or reunion or whatever experiences you have year-round, it'll be a first for those alumni who have just graduated. So that post-graduation experience is actually way longer than you think.
So, what are you doing during this time? We've gone over what you're doing from January to June, from graduation. So now you are in the post-graduation stage. And as Katie pointed out, this is a full year-long process of what we see of when students become really engaged with their former high school or former middle school. So what you will be doing is assuming your regular alumni contact through newsletters, inviting your community, your alumni, to share updates about their lives with you, find out where they're going to college, post, your college graduation or your high school graduation college list. And we're really trying to personalize and differentiate your communications with your alumni as much as possible. So that could even mean, differentiating to different groups or clubs and communicating with those people, with those alumni separately. Because what we know about alumni communication is that when it is personalized, your engagement will just skyrocket with your alumni. The general information updates doesn't land so well with an 18, 19-year-old new graduate. So again, really thinking about that personalization in your communication with your graduates.
Excellent. So now that we've got the context of what we mean by pre-graduation, which is right around this time through the spring, to graduation itself, and then the following post-graduation, we're actually going to go and dive into each of these sections. Katie's going to share some pain points that both parties are experiencing. Again, the angle that we're trying to share here is not only understanding where you're coming from, but putting yourself back in the shoes of the students themselves, what they might be facing from a to-do list, task list situation, but also their emotional needs. And then we're going to follow up with some clear ideas around case studies of what we can really be doing in each of these times and stages here. So Katie, do you want to go into the pain points?
So I'm sure as I was going over the timeline, you're thinking to yourself about all of the issues and all of the tasks you have to get done. So I just, based on what we know about, people in the role of, an alumni engagement coordinator or administrator, is that you need to, your first point is really your data of your students. So your students' email and contact information will be changing at this time. So if they move on, as I mentioned before, your options are their parents are trying to hunt down a personal email. So again, the issue here is communication. How are you going to collect your students' personal email? So for the student perspective, there's lots of distractions entering the springtime. They're waiting for their college acceptance letters. They're making their summer job plans, their summer plans in general, their last hurrahs with their friends, sports teams, etc., senior capstone projects, end of year projects, and saying goodbye to their friends.
So understanding all of this, we are going to probably continue to reiterate the importance of data here, because as soon as you lose contact with your alumni, it's far harder to establish it at a later date. So one idea in this space is obtaining your data early. We work with schools where we actually invite your seniors, your graduates, to the alumni portal or just to your alumni association, regardless of if you have a formal portal or not. You invite them early so that they understand what to expect, what resources there are. And by inviting them early, you're actually getting in front of them as well. You're introducing yourself. They might see you as a familiar face in the hallway, but if they don't know your exact role or don't know to expect future communications, this is really set the stage, establish now. So you can invite people live time by actually using the school email addresses to start, inviting people to a platform. and tracking whether people have signed in, whether they've updated their information. And this could be in advisories, these could be senior class meetings. Regardless, what you're trying to do is introduce them to whatever alumni experience you're providing them and encouraging that change of behavior of an updated email address. Now, you could, if you can't get in front of all of the seniors at the same time, you are able to potentially just email them an invite. It is a little bit harder to actually track them down if you're just sending an email and making sure they're reading it in its entirety. I do see, Abby, that you've just raised your hand. So if you want to, Katie, do you mind just tracking the
Yeah. You
comments
can
and chats so we can make
pop
sure
it
to answer
in
any questions? So yeah, Katie, if you'll just interrupt me if
chat.
Abby can submit the question. But regardless, what you need to think about here is when you're inviting people, that you are getting in front of them, setting the expectation. These are young individuals that are distracted by technology a lot. So you can very easily know that too much information is going to overwhelm them, or they're going to just scroll right by stuff. So keep it short, keep it simple. And you can easily also try and get information in other means if you don't have a portal like this. One of those ideas is to actually use it as an attendance record. So you can actually have people write their email address if they are logging, like when they're coming into campus, or if you have various advisories, instead of them just checking the box, hey, I'm here, the way you take attendance is by them actually having to type in or write out their personal email address. And I see in the chat, this is coming through.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it was an issue with volume. So
Oh,
if
great.
anybody else is having issues hearing us, if you could either in the chat or in the Q&A, just
Perfect.
pop in whether or not you are experiencing any issues.
Audio problems. Great. So what I was saying is that beyond just being able to, have people sign into a portal, checking, sign-in rates, update rates, what we're able to do is also just take it from a spreadsheet. The biggest watch out here is that unfortunately, children's handwriting are sometimes hard to read. So if you are accepting personal emails, make sure that you are able to view and read and that it's legible, that you can then input into whatever CRM system or spreadsheet tracking that you need to. With this, if you do this early on enough, it gives you time to actually hunt people down in the classrooms themselves. You can rely on deans, other staff in your high school, in your 8th grade, to help actually move this forward. One of those is actually thinking through whether there is any sort of college guidance team. And I'm mentioning college guidance. I know that we have some K-8 schools who have joined us, so this could also be, high school support. But what we actually have some of our schools do is, as a graduation requirement, help them set up a personal email. The last thing you want is to get another school address of their next high school, their next college email address, because that also has a finite time of access. Ultimately, you also have time to interact with parents. We do want you to have and prioritize a relationship with the students turned graduates turned alumni. However, this is the time where you have a strong relationship with the parents to think through, and you could actually receive updated information from them as well. So when you're obtaining data early, inviting them early to the portal, tracking down those who haven't logged in, who haven't updated their emails from their school one to their personal. You can do spreadsheets. You can crowdsource from other admin and staff. The key here, as you're thinking about getting this data, is the so what for the students. So if you can show the value of obtaining this for them by introducing them to alumni initiatives that are happening, that's really important. Alternatively, we actually have a lot of schools also use alumni for these senior capstone projects that you might have. So actually, we've helped because of my alma mater requesting whether we have internship opportunities. We've actually welcomed seniors to do various projects with us. You can use, like Wavelength has this visual. There's a lot of other CRMs that you can actually take the data, find alumni who are doing various things across industries, and help identify whether there are alum who can support in these senior projects. The example I can share from a Wavelength perspective is twofold. One is we had one who was thinking about software development, but wasn't sure if they wanted to do coding, or was it product management where they were influence coding because of what the front end features needed to look like. So we were able to instruct how to do competitive analysis, what software development looks like in an ed tech space, as well as how it loops into marketing and sales. There's a lot of different ways that you can have seniors begin to interact with the alumni base. But one of these is, as I mentioned, the senior project. Others include actually looping in alumni to supporting the transition from the seniors to the young alumni status. Can you be looping in the older alumni to welcome them? Are there quotes or letters that can be shared from older alumni to the seniors, wishing them well, giving them advice as they move on to the next stage? As we all know, there's sometimes healthy competition gets some activities. So as you're thinking through any of these data requests, if you can make it into a competition because you've got different teams, some schools have different like field day colors, or as I've mentioned, advisories. You can make this into a healthy competition of whoever has the largest amount of participation gets, a class party or swag, or it's just a group effort to reach a threshold. Regardless, I think that in the spirit of celebration, having a little bit of celebration as you're leading to this alumni status and alumni label might encourage some of these data changes themselves. We also work with a lot of schools that choose to have beyond graduation itself, things like senior banquets to help with this transition, sometimes including parents, sometimes only those graduates. Regardless, what you need to just be focused on is those setting of expectations around what this transition looks like to them. So it's who is their new point of contact, how they are still part of the community, even though they're no longer attending the school directly. Here, I have found that schools like to give a lot of materials out to students, and I always ask you to think back to yourself at that age and what you were doing with paper, other than stuffing it into your backpack and having it kind of crumpled up at the base of your bag. So something that we've encouraged, because everyone has technology at their fingertips, is the ability to have things like QR codes and easy resources online, so that even though you might be sharing out physical materials, having online digital versions that they can easily access using what they're most used to is also really helpful. So from an pre-graduation stage, focus on your data, because I know everything else that you're doing between event planning with other alumni initiatives, fundraising, what you really need to focus on is being able to get that invite out to your alumni. And when I say invite, it's just welcoming people to the larger alumni community. So moving on to graduation ideas, Katie, do you want to dive into pain points?
Yes, so this is the busiest time for you and your students, the graduation kind of week before and week after. It's packed, your schedule is packed. You have alumni coming back into the school for alumni weekends. You have your final fundraising goals and supporting the other staff, administration, and students with support for the graduation ceremony, for the graduation planning, and so forth. So it is a packed time for you, but it's also going to be a packed time for the students as well, for your graduates. Think about it, their whole identity that they've had their entire life as a student, it's in their locality and where they live is changing. A chapter is closing for them, and there's a lot of fear of the unknown, but also a lot of excitement. So that is a possibility for you to kind of come in and serve as that comfort and that familiarity to your student, and remind them that you are always going to be there for them. Even though they've graduated, they are still a part of your community, which is very reassuring to your graduates during this uneasy time.
I completely agree. And actually, that was just reminding me, Katie, of not only are the graduates experiencing their own emotions, but there's a lot of projection of family emotions onto themselves as well. So there's a lot of management, and we all know the chaos of whatever the graduation structure you have. It flies by. There's never enough time. So what we really recommend in this shortened time period is be in the moment. Be there, celebrating your seniors, celebrating your graduates. To Katie's point, showing that there is consistency, that even though their label of student to alum has changed, they are still a part of your community. The key with that label change is trying to stay consistent with the language. So, do you have an alumni association, or does every alum get welcomed into a larger alumni association or community, or is there an alumni council? While you're introducing students to the concept of becoming an alum in the pre-graduation stage, as well as in this current graduation stage, is the consistency. There's so many other things changing in their life that if you can just keep it really clean, concise, be supportive, that's the most important part right here. It's quick. There's really, other than parents perhaps like asking about more materials and information, you just want to be there and celebrating and supporting along the way. Because really the next step is to take a big whole breath and try and move forward in that post-graduation stage. So as I've mentioned before, QR codes are really helpful for additional materials. We have things like magic passwords where people can sign in live time if there is any interest, but it's so much happening that I would say have that available, but not priority. Instead, what you want to prioritize is celebrating your graduates with the larger alumni base. So you have amazing success with your students going off doing really cool things, between perhaps sports recruiting to academic achievements to where they're going off to college. What we really recommend is trying to celebrate those stories. And that could also be successes throughout their graduating year, like those seniors, the final senior capstone projects. Are there any ones that you want to highlight on an alumni specific content page? So what you want to focus on is highlighting their stories in this moment so that older alumni can also feel looped into the success of what is going on across your campus. Leading into post-graduation ideas, Katie, you want to jump in there with some of these pain points here?
Yes, and this is really, the point of this webinar is to remind everyone that the alumni process starts far before the graduation. But now here we are with your, bona fide alumni. What do we do next? So summer schedules for administrators are always tough. Some people are out on vacation, some people are in the school working. You don't have access to the staff you typically would have access to during a school year. So what you need to do, and what Katie said about the consistent language, consistent and developing consistent expectations that for your young alumni, for you as a institution, what can your alumni consistently expect from you is essential to starting off with your new alumni. Your graduates will be feeling the new freedom, and where does their alma mater, their high school, their middle school fit into their new identity, into their new reality. And that's why you really want to be clear with them about how you will fit in consistently going forward for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Yep. You want this to be a lifetime. This is like setting up a strong relationship for the future. As I've mentioned earlier on the webinar, it's a lot harder to get alumni re-engaged after you lose contact with them. So even though this first year might not see like the financial donations that other classes are going to be experiencing, what you really want to focus on is engagement, personalization, and support. So post-graduation, Those first communications are essential. How are you welcoming them, celebrating them as a class to the larger group community of alumni? So, how are the older alumni learning about the big wins that I had mentioned during that graduation? Celebrating those articles of where people are going off to, what have people been up to with your graduates, and that final, senior spring push. So, what you want to think through is that celebratory language, talking about future initiatives, introducing those young alumni to, what's about to be happening in the support that you're providing, and sharing materials and resources. Katie actually helped to design a few different newsletters that are templates that we offer that can easily be just redesigned in terms of your branding, but this is all available on our content hub. We'll link it with the resources that we send out tomorrow after this webinar is complete. But just know that when you're really thinking about delivering professional resources, you want to keep it short and sweet, but also relevant. So really think through when you're considering your first communications, who is it going to? Is it the larger community of alumni, or is it to just your young alumni base, or both? The key here is that you might have a bunch of resources, you might have a bunch of events, but if you start to over communicate with your young alumni about ideas and events that are completely not relevant to them, they might drop out faster. Same with fundraising goals. What you really need to be particular about is your communication and asks, that you're not over communicating where they're going to push that do not solicit button anymore. We have an equation. I'm happy to go through it later on this call if we have the time, that basically shows how much potential revenue loss you have, donation loss you have just by people opting out of future communications. And if you start at that young alumni stage, as Katie mentioned, this is like 50, 60 years long relationship you want to have. So focus on starting to celebrate with your new young alumni. One idea is actually bringing in the older alumni to support your graduates. So we have some schools who actually will target communication to their older alumni who attended the same college or high school that their students are going off to, asking for insights and advice to be able to pass along to the graduates. So if you target the older alumni saying, hey, we've got a few students that are heading off to this college. Do you have any advice about your experience there? It's not only making the older alumni feel engaged with the process, it's also making the young alumni feel more personalized and also supported as they head on to this new unknown. On top of that, if you don't have the college data, you can always request people to supply notes of congratulations to any of the graduates. This can be happening before, graduation itself, but I think that a lot of people have great insights and words of support and wisdom that they're willing to pass along. It's an easy touch point with your entire alumni base, and it's a great way to bring people into the fold of those new alumni feeling like they're part of the community as they're just getting their bearings. Lastly, when you're thinking about capturing these messages, it could be from anyone too. You could think about what that welcome message is from other community members, whether it's parents, whether it's also faculty who are trying to send those students off. But what you want to think about with this personalization is making sure no one feels left out. So if you have some young alumni who might be going to locations that don't have a lot of other alum who've attended that school, you want to still support them. So providing things like other ideas of, hey, there might be other alumni in your area, even if they aren't attending that actual school. So we actually have sub-communities on our portal, but you can create whatever type of groups you want, whether that's by college, by interests, by whatever type of group tags. We can even do sports. But all of this is to say, how do people identify? How do they identify with your larger school? How do they continue to feel supported at that, post-graduation phase? And it's kind of this gray, murky area of what's my new identity? I'm going to be another student, but I'm also an alum. How do I really bridge that gap of both of those identities together? What you want to think about giving, as I mentioned before, around communication to a broader audience or just to your young alumni, is the concept of resources that are available to them. There are some amazing resources out there, and rather than recreating the wheel, there are ways that you can repurpose resources. We've literally written, and again, this is in our content hub. These are free articles that you're able to repurpose, brand to your school, tweak the language of, and it's all about career support to college preparedness to K-8, entering high school, parent letters, things like that. All of these resources are to say you are focusing on the alum at the stage that they're living in today. These resources might not be relevant to your older alumni, or as we see here in this support, it's career versus college. You might want to just take a few articles at a time, but it's to show that, hey, that the life stage of your individuals might be they're having to pick a major in college, or they're trying to find their first internship. Having these resources, again, there are a bunch online that already are accessible, and simply sharing them out to your students, to your alumni rather, is going to show them that you're there, and it's an extra touch point that's useful to them so that they're doing those email open rates down the line. Something else to consider is if you do have those larger hubs of groups that are heading to the same school, is do you encourage covering coffee chats between various alumni years? Maybe the way that you can, cover X dollars of a coffee meetup is if someone submits an image with a text of like, hey, here's a few alumni gathering at their new campus. That way you've got physical copy and material to be able to use in a future newsletter, and also you're supporting cross-generational interactions. For those that are going to solo locations, can you think of any send-off materials or just singular letters that are just supporting them right before, their departure dates in late August, September time? Or is it a welcome back over the holidays event? As we mentioned, this is really supposed to help you set the groundwork for the future. So what you're thinking about is establishing the baseline expectations across all parts of your engagement. In this case, I'm really going to be focusing on giving behavior, volunteering, and those touch points being like email, event, however you want to talk about engagement and define it in your own way. But I'm going to dive into a little bit of each one of them by simply saying that you need to think through this might be the first experience someone's ever had being asked to give, or what's volunteering look like to them. They volunteered as a student before, but like in a more official capacity, what does this look like? So setting the groundwork is key here. As far as giving behavior, year one, you want to focus on participation. This can be easy around competition and celebration around, is there a certain percentage of giving that you want the entire class to donate towards? You really want to focus on, and I know that, bottom line, the dollar is going to be doing the talking, but you do want to focus on your lower number asks compared to other class years, just because you have to think through they might not have a job, or they might have a part-time job. They're in school. When you're thinking K-8, you're still probably targeting parents at this time instead of the students themselves. So, how do you establish giving behavior is really going to be necessary to consider. And you want to look through when is that young alumni status into regular giving status. You're going to want to look at the data and your history of looking at past giving to see if there's a trend of this year. I noticeably see that a student who's graduated and is X years out of high school is giving this much larger number because they've hit maybe mid-career level. So thinking of like giveaways or competition just to get people active and engaged is going to be your focus year one from a giving perspective. For volunteering, you're going to have young alumni who can fit in two aspects. They can be volunteers themselves, but they also might be benefiting from volunteers that you're providing. So volunteering as a class captain, or bringing in, class notes, or trying to keep data up to date, or sending out emails, you can have select classmates be volunteers. The thing with volunteering is we all know volunteering takes time to manage. And younger volunteers might need a little bit more instruction. So I say keep this a little bit shorter in terms of your short list of volunteers. Have one or two representatives that people will know and want to be talked to by. So if you already have like a class president, maybe they're your first go-to that year one. But think of the young alumni as experiencing what volunteers are doing. So are there mentorship opportunities your young alumni could experience? Or if they're attending events, shout out to the volunteer alumni who've helped to prepare, said event so that these volunteers, or rather these young alumni, can know, oh, this is something I could do in the future. So there's a lot of ways to think about volunteering. Be very clear on the expectations of what the role is. I found that younger volunteers are more likely to think they have more space to do whatever they want. So you have to be pretty tight with your instructions on them when you're looping them into various initiatives. Lastly, the engagement opportunities. You really want to focus on open rates and attendance. So having alumni specific events that are relevant to young alumni. Older alumni events are going to have alcohol, are going to have a more talking narrative where your young alumni might be looking for action and aren't going to be able to have that same access to drinks. So thinking through, do you have a wide variety of events occurring? We've found that active like sports is helpful. So do you have a Thanksgiving pickup game, or do you have, over the holidays when more people are back home, do you have like a low key event where there's a food and bowling? Really think through when you look at your calendar year of alumni events and initiatives, what age range does this really target? The best way for you to try and think through, is this relevant, is think back to yourself. Would you, as an 18, a 20, a 22-year-old, would you be attending an event that you're putting on? And is it okay if it's not relevant to them? And if not, and if it is okay, what else are they experiencing from you? Test your market open rates. What's great about data today is that it's very easy for you to be able to track engagement. Your subject line is going to matter, the amount of text you have, the call to action prompts. What you want to think through is what is gotten the most uptick of activity from your base, and that base could be your young alumni or larger alumni base. You also still have this year of a relationship with parents. So you can actually reach out to them if you notice bad emails. I mentioned sub-communities before. We've actually had schools do young alumni portals that allow parents on. And this is not only just for K-8 schools with minors, but it's also young alumni with parents, so that there's that ongoing support because it's a community effort. And then once they've reached a certain age, they're not only part of the young alumni network, but they're also part of that full network where everyone's involved, and it's only alumni specific. It's private and gated in both locations. Parents are still involved at a certain age, and then they're kind of kids spread their wings. These students as alumni have aged out to the point of feeling engaged, just feeling empowered to network by themselves. So we've done a lot of talking. In a quick recap, Katie walked you through pre-graduation, graduation, and post-graduation stages as yourselves and as your students. It's important to think through both angles. We then kind of went through the key aspects here. You want to introduce yourself and the alumni in terms of your initiatives, what exists, the language that you'll be using. You want to be obtaining accurate data on your alumni. If you can, beyond contact data, have, what's the next school they're going off to, or what interests do they have? That personal data is going to help to track and be used in the future. And lastly, just set the groundwork of the behaviors you're hoping to see in future alumni. So if you look at your current alumni and see pain points of like, oh, I really wish this was happening, your young alumni are who you can influence to make that change. So once they're the age of that older alumni base you want to influence, they're already going to be influenced by that time. So these are young, malleable minds that you can actually really start to influence as you're growing whatever vision of your alumni base community association, whatever you want to call it. So we made it through. Now is your time to ask any questions in the Q&A section. Katie will be fielding them and can ask me any as they come up. I know we're at 12:45. I know some people might want to drop. This will be recorded and shared out, and we'll be sending out slides as well. Excellent.
Yeah, there's also a Q&A. There's the Q&A feature that
Yes.
has been working well with some people.
Excellent. Well, as we wait for some questions to come through, I wanted to share that equation that I mentioned. This is from Alumni Access. That they did a really great job explaining this, and I like to repurpose this as a visual. Basically, the concept is that if you have a school with a certain amount of young alumni and they have opted out because you've over solicited or over communicated in that first year, it's trying to identify the number of lost donors you have. And the concept is if you lose a certain amount of donors year one, and they could give for X number of years with the average giving rate, it just shows how much dollar value each year you could have by simply losing on that opt-out alumni base. These are just fake numbers here, but this equation of opted out alumni compared to your giving rate plus the average gift, and you multiply that by the potential number of years they could be giving, it just shows how important keeping the data accurate, making sure you're making it personalized, and really asking the right way is going to be that much more important.
Katie, going along with data, what should schools do if they have lost or don't have accurate data for previous years?
Great question. So with lost data, there are a few ways to do this. We have actually 3 ways at Wavelength. One is data enrichment. So you can actually find missing email addresses using and there are a few different resources out there. We have it built into our system, but it's basically trying to match those names, class years with updated records and their missing email addresses. Another is through volunteering. So if you have, crowdsourcing, if you have those volunteer class officers, you can actually assign them a task of, hey, here is the missing contact information we have on your classmates. Can you help to update them? And lastly is the source themselves, asking alumni to do so. That requires a little bit more word of mouth. It also, some alumni are not willing to give their data because they think the only reason is so you can solicit them. So providing platforms, providing personalized outreach that is separate from donations helps them recognize the value of providing up-to-date information. So, having it out there available on your website, on social media, showing the value of alumni initiatives, that'll help get them in the door as well.
We just got a question with someone who's starting an alumni program at their school, wondering if anyone, would like to connect or kind of from the webinar. So I don't know, Katie, if we could share this person's email when we send out.
Why don't we do this? When we send out the email, again, it'll probably come out tomorrow. We can have a form of if there is anyone who wants to connect in that young, starting off stage, we'd be happy to put you all in touch. So you can just supply that email. We'll put the instructions in the invite. But I think that's a great idea. We're happy to share ideas of, what other schools are doing as they're just beginning their programs. We have some schools who've had unofficial programs started by other alumni and, the challenge of trying to take that back as a school. There's a lot of different things to consider. So, I think it's great to try and connect. What's really exciting and great for you all as in your role is that you are actually not in competition with each other because your alumni are all unique. So having a support network, being able to connect with each other, hear pain points, hear successes, that's always really useful. Excellent. I also want to make sure that you all are aware we do have access to being able to, Katie's gonna be able to run any sales through with you all. There's a discount if you all choose to use our platform. We're happy to give you also just some free conversations around sales strategy. We have a lot of resources. We really just want to share out what's available, what other schools are doing, so that you all can be successful in your own roles. Katie, are there any other questions that I can help to answer?
That looks like it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we really appreciate your time today. I know that we are running over my 45-minute goal, but I think that we covered a lot. We are here to answer any questions you may have. Katie can walk you through the platform more too if you're interested, and resource will come out tomorrow as we have this published, and we'll send out the deck slides as well separately.
Yeah, and I just to speak on that, I would be happy, like Katie said, to walk you through the platform. I'd love to hear more about your schools and the initiatives and the pain points that you're personally having. My email is open, katie@searchwavelength.com. So please reach out. We are here to help and be a resource to you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time. And Lisa, I see that you just commented, so we can actually stay on and talk, or we can take this offline. And everyone else, I hope you enjoy the rest of your days, and good luck with seeing out your graduates to that young alumni status. Lisa, why don't we do this? I will send you a separate email with Katie and Katie CC'd in, and we can talk through what this might look like to your additional questions here.
I definitely have some ideas. We work with a lot of schools that meet the same demographic that you're speaking about. So
yep,
happy to help.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone. Feel free to reach out.